Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to another session of Great Shouts Marketing. Every fortnight we come together to discuss a particular B2B marketing topic. We have a person or people from the community giving a presentation for a period of time. Then we have a chance to ask questions at the end. I'm your host. I'm Ed Davidson. I'm a fractional head of marketing. And this fortnight, we have a particularly special session. I'm going from great shouts to super shouts. So we've got a whole growth division crew in here to give you a real deep dive into ABM and how all the ABM channels come together. So I'm just letting people into this room here. Cool. So Tom Hurst, if you'd like to share your screen and crack on, that would be great. I'm just going to let you do that.
I think if you enable screen sharing, it looks then I will crack on. And yeah, my job throughout is just to be slide gopher. That's really what I'm here for. I'll try and do a small amount of talking as well. And let me just get this sorted. But yeah, so first of all, thank you very much, Ed, for asking us all on here. It's great to be here, and it's my important job to open things up before I hand over to Kerry, Tom, and Alex. But I thought I would start just to do a short introduction on me, and like lots of you, probably there's quite a few slashes to my working life. But the way I would sum up what I do is that I lead growth and marketing teams at startups and scale-ups. I do that in two ways. I do that like Ed as a fractional freelance CMO, but also as part of growth division, where I'm leading an external agency style team and working with top experts like the three others on this call. So that's kind of what my day-to-day is. And yeah, working with some great clients at the moment. You can see some nice logos down there in the bottom corner. But yeah, prior to getting into marketing, I also had some experience as a founder myself. So I've equally had that experience of building marketing and even doing ABM from the ground up. But yeah, so that's me. But I'm also conscious of time, because I think we all worked out we have about 7 minutes to talk. So jumping straight into ABM, I thought I would start by just saying, my view of what account-based marketing actually is, because it means slightly different things to each of us. But for me, at the top there, it is personalized marketing to reach, engage, and convert specific companies or individuals. And this is something that in B2B, it's been flavor of the month for the last year or two. Perhaps now you might say product-led marketing or product-led sales is the newest one. They might have just tilted ahead of ABM, but there's been lots of chat about ABM, I'm sure, on all of your LinkedIn feeds. But yeah, so it's a great tactic, and it's one that we use with quite a few of our clients, and I've seen be quite successful. But to bring it to life, I thought I would start with a non-B2B, completely separate example of someone using this quite successfully. So it also gives me an excuse to put a photo of Forrest Gump up there, Tom Hanks. And that's mainly why I've chosen this story. But yeah, so the story is, to set the scene, in 2012, a podcaster called Chris Hardwick, who had a podcast that at that point was called The Nerdist. It's now called Idiot, I think. So, interesting rebranding choice. But anyway, he'd been doing his podcast for a couple of years, and it was all about sort of film and culture. And he worked out that, to take it to the next level, what he needed to do was to get a Hollywood star, a big star on his podcast. And he picked Tom Hanks because he saw that there was a news story saying that Tom Hanks, as a niche hobby, collected vintage typewriters. So he's into writing. Money's no object. Why not just get into a niche rabbit hole of typewriters? So what he ended up doing is he bought a 1934 vintage typewriter, and he wrote to Tom Hanks on that typewriter. He then left his letter in the typewriter, packaged it all up, and sent it to Tom Hanks' agent. And within 2 or 3 days, he got this reply back, which I won't read out in the interest of time, but it starts with Tom Hanks saying, I'm not going to fall for this bribe, blah, blah, blah. Oh, but it does type quite nicely. Go on then. And so Tom Hanks came on his podcast. I listened to it a couple of days ago, so you don't have to. It was great to be reminded of how innocent podcasters were in 2012. The sound quality is terrible. It really is just a random chat about all sorts of things. But point is that at the moment where they talk about how Tom Hanks came on the show, you could tell there was this real kind of warmth, and he was really happy to be there. And it's because he'd made that kind of connection. So to break that down in marketing terms, which is why we're all here, for me, there's 3 steps to this. The first stage is the research, design, and strategy. So that's going to be fundamental to any ABM campaign, is understanding, for your target accounts, what really matters to them, what's your offer going to be, and how are you going to approach them, which channels will you go to. Then step 2, launch the marketing campaign. In this case, it was direct mail, so it was sent in the post. And then 3 is the outcome. And this is quite an important one as well, because it's with ABM, anyone who talks about it will always tell you it's a long-term play. It's not instantly going to equal sales. But I think what all of us are trying to do with ABM is to increase the speed of conversion. And so what I like about Tom Hanks' note here as well is he's not actually saying he's going to be on the podcast, but he's saying my people will be in touch. And he did end up being on the podcast some months later. So for me, it's quite a neat example that brings to life what ABM is all about. Of course, it's not just for podcasters. It's a very successful, fundamental part of how all sorts of big software companies, B2B companies, are selling to large accounts. And it's something that we've seen, smaller companies use quite successfully as well. So I thought I would use that as a kind of starting point, and I'm trying to keep a bit of an eye on time as well. But so the next question then that people often ask is, is ABM for me? Surely I need loads of budget. Am I at the right stage? Should I be doing it as a startup? And so I have a quick breakdown here. Well, on his slides, we did swap notes. He's got some good factors. At the top there, if you want to target high value prospects with a personalized approach, that's certainly a strong fit for ABM. On the other side, if you're focused on lead gen at all costs and want a quick ROI, so to all the marketeers here, I'm sure that this is something you hear lots from founders. To all the founders here, I'm sure it's something that you've heard yourself say. So if you're at that stage in the journey where you really are just chasing lead gen, and any pound, dollar, euro that you're spending on marketing, you want to quickly see how that converts into an MQL, then this probably isn't the one for you. Not yet. And that's the other kind of point with this slide, is it might be that right now it's not the time for ABM, but that doesn't rule out in the future. But yeah, going back to reasons to do it. So if you want to target high value prospects with a personalized approach, big yes. You're prepared to invest time and budget creating some assets for this campaign. You can be patient with longer sales cycles and ROI on this kind of program. And then finally, this is the one that, again, will resonate with lots of marketers. You're confident that sales and marketing will work well together. So I think that ABM, almost more than any other type of marketing, it succeeds and fails based on how sales and marketing work together. Because to choose your accounts, to follow up with them, for this to really work, you need to dovetail and work really closely together. It's really not just a job for, oh, we'll give this to marketing, good luck, bring us some leads. It's very sort of hand holding. So yeah, it's a quick summary there. A few other factors to consider. I don't think I'll have time to go through all these, but I guess the top 2 there I would concentrate on. So one important factor to add in the pot here is that account-based marketing isn't only for new business. It's often used to cross-sell and upsell into your existing clients. So, where you might have some enterprise clients where actually you've only got 50 seats if you're selling software, maybe there's potential to get thousands. And that can be really effective because you've already got a potential champion in that company. And what you need to do is leverage them. Maybe you're going to give them some very personalized information, personalized swag, whatever it might be. That's one way you might approach this, but it might also just be drawing on their knowledge and kind of understanding of their company to help you to then tailor your marketing to approach and spread your tentacles throughout that company. So that's one point I'd flag on here. Second one, it doesn't have to involve expensive tech or huge budgets. And this does link to my my picture that I've chosen here. There is a lot of hot air out there about ABM. You know, it's one of these flavor of the month topics, as I said, and you'll see people on LinkedIn saying, don't create a wish list. It's all about tech that tracks intent, et cetera, et cetera. I think that there's always truth in statements like that, but I think that, for example, if you think about tech to track buying intent, if you have strong traffic and you've got that kind of volume of data where tracking that kind of information makes sense, then yes, spending some serious money on technology to track that intent and then automate how your campaigns go out could be effective. But at a scale up and startup level, quite often you might be quite effective without having huge volumes of traffic coming to your website. And that is where you can still get intent data, but it might be with smaller data sets from what you can see on HubSpot, Google Analytics, whatever you're using. But equally, it comes from sales. It comes from understanding from sales, you know, who were they having conversations with 6 months ago where there was some intent there? How can you follow up? So yeah, that is this one. And then moving on to what I tried to do with the next few slides is to make them as practical as I could. So hopefully you'll have something here that you could take away and use to launch your own campaign. So I've got a bit of a checklist here to get started and to launch your campaign. But yeah, just to go through a couple of them at the top there. First of all, building a target list. As I kind of said, lots of ABM gurus out there will say the last thing you want to do is sit down and create a wish list, because everyone's going to put Apple, Nvidia, Microsoft, Amazon on their list. I don't have a problem with creating that target list like that. I think if you get sales and marketing together, you talk about, you know, in our niche segments, who do we really want to target? But then I think the next level of it is to understand, you know, from sales, who have we already spoken to? From our CEO's personal network, who do we have potential referral into? From existing clients, who can introduce us? And then you start to get into a tiered approach as well, which Kerry is going to explain in brilliant detail in a moment, where you might have your top tier that you would do a huge amount of personalization for. So these would be your highest value prospects. You might then work down to tier 2, tier 3, tier 4. And at each level, you would be prepared to put in slightly less effort, slightly less resource, but you can have ABM that will target each layer. But I'll leave most of explaining that to Kerry. So I think you can build a target list, but it can't just be a wish list. Then next step, research, draft strategy, take stock of assets. I think the important thing here is to match up what do prospects care about, what do we need to create, and what's realistic to create, and also to have a bit of a think about what could we repurpose from what we've got already. Because one starting point that can work well for these kind of campaigns is if you look at your core marketing, general marketing, what creative, what message is landing quite well at the moment. If we were to take that and try and personalize it for 50 accounts, how would we do that? So yeah, a couple of points on that one. And then the third point here, which is the one I'll end on this slide, setting clear objectives and winning buy-in. So I think one of the big challenges with ABM is around setting these KPIs, because as we were kind of saying at the start, it's a long-term play. You can't really judge it against growth of MQLs in the first quarter, maybe not even in the first 6 months. So you have to find some other ways of setting some really clear objectives. And I think on the next slide, yes, there we go, very seamless. I've got a few tips here, and on the left-hand side there, you can see an example of how in Growth Division we set what we call OKRs, objectives and key results. Don't take the examples I put there as gospel. I think I sort of scribbled them down yesterday in about 5 minutes. But with account-based marketing, your KPIs should be separate and distinct from your core marketing objectives. An important question to think about, going back to sales and marketing work together, is how can you align sales and marketing? And then, two real sticking points for me here. Like I was saying, first month and first quarter, because you're not just going after lead growth, you need to come up with some smart ways to prove the value of what you're doing. So really kind of think about that. Further along, like within 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, whatever it might be, you would expect to see some leads and some conversions. But I think to win buy-in from founders, from the FD, whoever it might be, you need to come up with some key results, some metrics to track that prove the impact of what you're doing. And then having said all of that, my final point on this one is I think it is very important to draw a line in the sand. So you do need to know after a reasonable length of time, if this hasn't happened by 6 months or 12 months, 24 months, whatever it might be, then this campaign isn't working. And that's fine. Hopefully you've learned something from it. Hopefully you've created some assets that can be used in other ways, but you do need to have that kind of end point. And I think one natural way to do that might be to compare and contrast your marketing that is going out to accounts as non-ABM versus ABM. So you're probably going to be spending a lot more money, effort on ABM. And if the speed of conversion after 18 months hasn't significantly improved on your non-ABM, then that's a clear signal that, maybe this isn't quite working. Maybe you need some sort of rethink. So then we objectives. Yeah. How am I doing for time?
It's 17 minutes past. So this is a super shout. So again, I said it's a 45-minute session, but just being aware of all your guys.
Yes. Okay. Yes. I think then what I should do is just kind of skim over the final 2 or 3, and then I'll hand over to Kerry. So then channel strategy, there's a few tips here for choosing channels. There is a reason that we've got the other speakers on here that are on the call. They all link together quite seamlessly. And then here, I put together an example of how those channels might interact through an ABM campaign. So running out of time, some key takeaways there. I think I'll just leave you with the top one there. Be creative and ambitious. I think what I love about account-based marketing is that it encourages you, even in a B2B context, to be very creative, to really think about what crystallizes value for your customers, and that allows you a bit of freedom to be much more creative than you might normally be. Be very ambitious, but also set very clear goals. And that's all we got time for. But yeah, over to you, Kerry.
Great. Okay, so if you just move to the first slide. So I'm going to talk you through a framework for content for ABM. And I've used every different type of content in this process. And it can be used creatively, which I'll go through. So starting with like ICP pain point content, which might go to more people. And you've got industry specific, target company size, and then you're getting really personalized. You've got hyper personalized and then bespoke reports. So I'm going to dive into each one and give you examples and then tie it up at the end. So I talk really fast, so sorry, but hopefully you might catch up in time. So next slide, please, Tom. So first of all, pain point led content. So this would be about your target ICP, spanning across probably a few industries. So this can be shared more broadly, and it is far less resource intense to create. However, you can use this and make it hyper personalized by putting those personalized elements into your outreach emails or into your LinkedIn direct messages or even lead nurture campaigns. And this is what I've done previously. And I've got amazing like click-through rates of like 75%, open rates the same as well, and leading to sales as well. So the next one is industry specific. So obviously this is talking to the needs of a specific industry, for example, like healthcare or fintech, and kind of think of this as like one level deeper than pain point content. An example there is HP, who created a sector series. They generated 33 million out of that approach. And a good tip for this is you can take something that's you've created before, like it might be like a generic guide or ebook, and repurpose it for an industry so that you're kind of reusing that content and not creating it from scratch. And that's something we've done quite a bit. The next one down is target company size. So you can think of this as just cutting the market in a different way, really. So it depends on your ABM approach. But when I worked at Experian, we used that approach and we targeted large enterprise credit providers, and they spanned multiple industries. And we created very specific content for that, and also a newsletter. And that led to 8 million in revenue just from that specific campaign. The next one down is hyper personalized. So think like one pages, blogs or landing pages that are just talking to one account. So this is where you're getting like really into the detail. It is much more resource intensive, but definitely worth the investment for like the top tier accounts. And you might, if you did it as a blog, for example, we've done this before where we've like made it so it's not searchable or indexable on the site, but you can send it directly just through an email campaign to one specific account. And then the final one, bespoke reports. So this is the most resource intense, and I have experience of doing this as well, where we've actually had data on a specific account and been able to then like play that back to them of like exactly what the challenges might be with their customers, for example, stats about their business. And then we've played that back to them through reports, but also repurposed it into content we've been able to do for like personalized roundtable events as well, where we've actually gone into that company and presented those findings to them. So you might want to think of this for your like really engaged tier 1 accounts, because it does take a lot of time to create this, but the payoff is huge. So this is an example from O2, who closed seven-figure new business based on this approach, and I've seen similar results as well. And the next slide, please, Tom. So, just one up. So, key takeaways and hacks. So, when you're going through your ABM campaign, just think about which type of content is going to suit your approach best. Also, think about mixing it up as well. Make sure you create high quality content, goes without saying. I've already touched on this, but review existing content to see if you can personalize it by account, and think long-term and consistent. Obviously, that's really important. Only 3% are rated by right now. I've got that illustration on the side. So you've got to think of the different layers of content you need to create for where they are in the buying cycle as well. And if there's one thing I want you to take away, it's to try and track engagements and topic interest over time, which leads me on to my final slide. So this is actually a real life example from a previous role where we basically tracked every individual's interactions. So we did it as an individual level and an account level. And we tracked online and offline data. So we knew exactly what emails they'd opened, what content they'd read, what webinars they'd attended, even what they commented on LinkedIn posts and all that kind of juicy insight. We provided this information to sales on a monthly basis, so they could see out of their accounts who are the most engaged accounts, and then drill into the details for that account and see exactly which stakeholders at that account and what they've read, and even a single customer view for every single contact as well. So this was absolutely game changing. And I think going back to Tom's original point about that sales marketing alignment, this is what did it. And then we were all on the same page. And this kind of, and also we used this to help us to decide who to create those bespoke reports for. Because if you could see someone is highly engaged in a topic, then we would create something personalized on that topic specifically for that account as well. And sorry, that was really super fast, but I'm very happy to go into any more detail if anyone wants more information.
No, that was perfect, Kerry. It was needed after my. But yeah, let's keep it going. Tom.
Yeah, hi everyone. That was a tough act to follow, so I'll try my best. I think we've already touched a little bit on fit, so I'm not going to dwell on this. But I think when it comes to LinkedIn ads, I think the ones that I'd highlight are, you know, if your target audience, that you're trying to sell to in the market, that you're trying to advertise to, experiences quite long sales cycles, then I think it's your better fit for ABM. As Tom said, it's not a silver bullet just because you can hit the right accounts that you believe are most likely to buy or of the highest value. So yeah, there needs to be, if it's a very short sales cycle, maybe there's quicker approaches, or you focus more on that one-to-one. But yeah, traditionally long sales cycles are good for ABM. Average contract value at least 20K. If you're coming onto the LinkedIn ads platform and expecting a deal is not worth more than anything less than that really, and it starts to become quite difficult to generate positive return on investment. And then just quickly touching on the website, because I think we've talked about time frame and patience with that regard. But when it comes to website conversions, I think the biggest thing I've noticed, and even recently, the website has to be able to cash the checks that LinkedIn sends. So yes, LinkedIn's got great targeting, but is the website able to convert traffic organically and without LinkedIn before you turn that on? Because yes, it can be very powerful, but ultimately the conversion happens on the website. So that's quite an important point there. But yeah, we can flip to the next one. Cool. So I mean, there's many ways to skin a cat, as they say. There's so many ways to tier accounts and work out how you're going to prioritize who you're going to go after, and how you're going to deploy resources as a result of that. Because ultimately there will be you'll be people you want to reach one-to-one with, like Perry had mentioned there, but then there are also a larger addressable market. And I think yes, we can cherry pick who we want as our target account list, but ultimately there's always surprises, and there's always accounts that could have been very interested in your proposition, but were never targeted. So I advocate for, if we're talking about tier one, there is a unique ability, I guess, on LinkedIn to upload a contact list and a company list to your campaigns. So, you could literally generate a contact list of the priority contacts that exist in your sort of tier one account list, their highest value accounts. And then you're talking one-to-one with them, not only in direct outreach and through some of that content collateral that Kerry mentioned, but also through message ads coming into the feed, coming into the inbox on LinkedIn with a personalized message, including their company name and some other dynamic features. So that can be powerful. But ultimately, you can then give air cover to that by targeting more the broader buying committee at the companies as well. And then I think you've got a one-to-many approach where it's more of an exploration. You may try a different vertical, different persona segments. Ultimately, you're exploring there, whereas in tier one, you're trying to exploit because you know that they are high value to the business already. But yeah, that's just the way of thinking about it when it comes to LinkedIn. Can you see the next slide? Cool. A lot to look at here, but I'm just going to explain it very simply because we're going to go into detail. There's 3 layers on the page. So basically, when you come to LinkedIn ads and you put some ads live, typically that's what we call a cold traffic audience. It's an audience that are most likely unaware of your business, definitely haven't generated that trust that could lead to a conversion, regardless of whether they're a cherry-picked account list or contact list. So the purpose here is you've got your tiers on the left, 1A, 1B. So you've got the contact list in 1B, and then you've got in 1A the company list, which will be broader, larger audience size, you can spend more. But then that really targeted contact list, where you may pick the most important ICP or persona, whatever you want to call it. And yes, you can't scale that as quick as a company list, but you can go one-to-one with communication. And then it's obviously even less budget allocation to tier 2. But ultimately, you've got to show these tiers content, obviously. So then they're coming into the roadmap in the cold traffic layer. What do we show them there? I'll explain a little bit in a minute with some examples. Driving that traffic to the homepage. So I'm just going left to right here. And yeah, why do we do homepage? Well, it's early in the sales journey. We don't know where someone is in the buying journey at this point, right? And we have to assume that they are unaware unless we see relevant intent to progress them through to retargeting, which is the warm and the hot layer of this roadmap. So typically we let them explore through going to the homepage first. We track what pages they go to on the website, and that can inform our subsequent retargeting. And then the warm layer is built up of people who we believe have shown awareness. So have they been on the website, or have they engaged in our cold traffic ads that we initially put out when we were trying to build awareness? And as a result of that, we can then retarget them in the feed of LinkedIn based on intent shown already through previous ads, right? So it's kind of a second layer, I guess, for lack of a better way of explaining it. And obviously, as Tom alluded to, there are tools that you can use, intent-based tools out there, like 6sense as an example, where you can pull people in based on what they're doing, excluding LinkedIn. So are they typing into Google LinkedIn ad agencies or whatever your target keywords would be? Or are they going on review sites and looking at your category, right? But we should probably pull them in and talk to them as well, because they're showing that they're in a kind of educational mode. And then just finally in that hot layer, it's where we're going for that conversion. So we transition from a warm layer where we're talking to people who we believe are aware of the brand to a hot layer where we've actually shown tangible interest in our brand or proposition. There may be they might be on your demo page, or they might be looking at a competitor or looking at your profile on a review site, or they could be on your demo page, your trial page on your website, or they could be just engaging in some of our content in the feed of LinkedIn, like a case study, for example, which shows interest rather than just sort of clicking on a branded video. They're actually engaging in a case study, which shows more interest. So, it's not perfect, but it's intent based, so that, we're not assuming that everyone just needs to go from left to right here. We're saying, if we see the right intent signals, we'll progress people through these layers. And ultimately the CPA, the cost per acquisition to get someone to submit on a website and inbound obviously reduces through those layers, and it can be less than 100 in the hot layer if we get it right, which we've seen with some growth division clients, which has been quite interesting. So yeah, I won't dwell on the individual pages of the layers, but what I will say is maybe in your own time, you can look at the examples here of how we brought to life the content across the 3 layers and how that changes as they progress. And then just examples on the left of the buckets of the audiences that we're building up. So basically you think of the left as the criteria that someone has to match to come into the layer. And then just some sort of screenshotted examples that we like that have been activated in those different layers. The way we set this up in the ad account is you just basically at the very top, the kind of highest level of the account is called the campaign groups, and we kind of lay that out as the stages of the funnel, and then we put the content into each of those stages, so we can clearly report on it. So yeah, that's kind of the layered approach. And then just finally, just talking about optimization. I guess I'd quite like to think about LinkedIn ads optimization as like the macro and the micro. So we want to focus on the optimizations that are going to move the needle the quickest and be of the highest value, right? So when we talk about macro, we're thinking, is it a company or a contact list that's going to generate the best return? Obviously there is still native targeting, which LinkedIn has, that can be considered. But yeah, obviously from an ABM perspective, you've got the account list or the contact list. We can A/B test that. From an ad format perspective, we want to look at kind of static imagery versus GIFs, which can be more engaging. What's going to drive the best click-through rate? When we're looking at video, we want to look at video consumption rates. So how many people that get an impression start watching it? How many people finish the video? And is that better if we start with a human face or an animation or a headline, right? So that's a force multiplier if you get that right for retargeting. And then the offer is key. Is it a demo? Is it a trial? Is it an audit? Is it a calculator? What's going to make people move to action? And then just finally, from a messaging perspective, I think internally across marketing and sales, it's critical that you can answer some of those questions as to what pain point actually does resonate the most with our audience. What does take people into market for a solution like ours, and what benefit do people seem to be clicking on the most and showing that interest. So yeah, I think those are the force multipliers at the end of the day. It's creative, it's messaging, it's offer. And then from the micro to finish with the micro, from my perspective, the heat map you see on that visual on the right, people look at the creative first. When we've kept all else constant and we focus on changing the creative, we see the biggest change in click-through rate. So if you take one thing from this, definitely obviously all the things about targeting and the funnel, but also think about, you can A/B test that intro text above the ad and the headline below it, but ultimately it's going to be that creative that will move the needle. But there's just other things in there you can read in your own time about toggling the way you bid on the platform. And yeah, continuous exclusions, right? LinkedIn's naughty. If you don't tell it to exclude something, it will sneak in and take your money. So continuous refinement of who we're reaching and who we don't want to reach, and telling LinkedIn that clearly. But yeah.
I like it. LinkedIn's naughty, so I'm going from that.
It is.
Alex, are you taking us home? And
Awesome.
then
Okay,
we've
guys.
got
So
enough time for questions at
I've
the
got-
end to finish 45.
I can do this. All good. So I'll skip my intro. I run direct outreach at Growth Division. That's my intro. So before we jump into ABM within direct outreach, I just wanted to go through some more kind of direct outreach strategies. So we've split direct outreach into 3 defined strategies: lead gen, demand gen, and targeted gen. Just to quickly touch on them, lead gen is your more traditional approach. It's a bit more of a numbers game, and you're trying to book in a call through direct messaging people. Demand gen, instead of trying to book in a call, we're trying to get a sign up for a newsletter, an ebook download, and trying to create that kind of demand side as opposed to just trying to book in a call. And then more of a targeted gen, which could be argued to be a little bit more touching towards ABM, but also could be a bit more personalized. So there's one thing in common with all of these, is that on the next slide, please, Tom, you can see that the more traditional direct outreach approach, and I've taken Tristan as our ICP that we're targeting. Generally for direct outreach, you use LinkedIn, email, maybe Twitter outreach, and maybe cold calling if you're up for it. And you're just going to directly message them and say, hey, Tristan, use some personalization. There's some fancy tools out there to do it. At the end of the day, what I want is to get a demo. And what we see from that is that it's a fantastic way to get demos and things. However, it's not going to work when going after larger corporate companies all the time. So how do we get this put together in terms of ABM? Is we use different channels such as events, LinkedIn ads, and inbound SDR, which is one that I've developed a little bit more. So just to go over this briefly, so for some clients who are attending and exhibiting or attending events, this is a great opportunity to get some personalized outreach going out. So, identifying speakers, attendees, scraping lists from event apps that you get access to now. Sadly, unless you're based in the US, you can't actually buy lead lists anymore, which is always useful for US clients, but there's also access to in different ways. You can create pre-event campaigns, booking calls before the event, chat to them, and then actually use the event as a follow-up meeting and grab a coffee to discuss options at that point. Second of all, LinkedIn ads. So Tom Tigwell touched on lots of different things that we can do with that, but we can actually connect with LinkedIn ads as soon as a lead's coming in, ebook download on the cold layer. If we're not trying to press for a call booking form or straight into a Calendly, we can get that into a spreadsheet. Our team can enrich it, and then we can reach out, connect with them, and book in calls. Even ask for feedback on the ebook and start conversations. And lastly is around the inbound SDR. So one strategy that we're running with clients at the moment is working with their internal sales team, getting a list of 20 to 30 ideal customer accounts. This also works on white space. So it might actually be a client that they're already working with, but they instead want to work with Greece instead of the US that they've currently got, but their sales team can't actually get in touch with them. So we build out a contact list, we message them over a 4 to 6 week campaign, and we can utilize inbound sources as well. So website submissions, ebook downloads, and things like that. That's all part of that kind of inbound solution. So just a quick case study. I won't go into too much detail about this one because it will be sent over, but essentially this is an example of what we did in a 3-week period. So very much took the account director's ideal accounts that they wanted to go after. We launched a 3-week LinkedIn campaign, just connected with people that in the account that they wanted to speak with, received 20 responses that led to 3 meetings being booked with some really high value enterprise clients. And to date, within those 3 weeks, we got 90K of deal size was created just from this small experiment. So just to sum up, this is now the touch point that we can see how we're going to be getting in touch with Tristan on an ABM approach. So we start off with the soft touch over LinkedIn. We then utilize another channel such as events or LinkedIn ads or inbound leads. And then we actually personalize the message around these channels to essentially grab their attention and have a higher positive return on investment. And also they tend to result in converting quicker and they're higher quality. And that's everything from me.
Nice. I love it. Tom, is that the final slide there, Tom Hurst?
That sure is.
Yeah.
Done. Well done, everyone.
Wonderful. It's a perfect relay of all the Growth Division guys and how it works together with sales and marketing, which is awesome. And thank you guys. I know it's tough bringing it all together, especially when it's a lot of people there. So, and there was so much content there. And what I'll do when I share the video recording round, I'll share the deck so everyone can drill into it in a little bit more detail as well. So we've got 3-4 minutes to ask questions. I know we've got a few coming in from Tristan, so we can go through those. And one's kind of quite similar to mine there. So like the decision-making unit, we all know kind of B2B, especially with kind of ABM, you've got very much particular people in an organization that are going to make the decision. When you tie that ABM strategy together with each of these components, do you tend to target one particular part of the decision-making unit, or do you consider different touch points across different channels? So good to get a feeling of that.
I think I'll start on that and then I'll hand over to everyone else. I think it's really important. One of the points that I didn't manage to say out loud, but is on a slide somewhere there, is always think about buying committees, always think about cross-selling, because if we're going after big companies, whether they're a new cold prospect or an existing customer with some white space, it's in those kind of companies, it's never just going to be one person. You're not going to get a direct line to the CEO. It's very unlikely that you will with this kind of play. So you need to think about who is that niche role that I'm trying to reach, that my service, my software could really, really help. But then for them to get sign off, who do they need to convince and how can we convince them?
Makes sense. Anyone adding to that in terms of how it works across any of the specific channels?
I can just quickly touch on LinkedIn ads perspective. I think it's critical that you segment, because otherwise you're showing the same messaging and creative to two very different personas that would probably need the different message, right? It sounds very simple, but the amount of campaigns I see that just bundled together. And not only does the performance go up when you segment, but the insight obviously internally as well as to what resonates. But also, like, I don't think I've ever had a client that's not wanted to reach the CEO. So I think it's about also thinking who is actually likely to be that person that inquires on your website. I know it sounds very simple, but like a CEO of a fairly large company is not going to probably be the person booking a demo or a trial. So it's about thinking, okay, they may need some awareness and they may be the ones signing off, but who is actually going to convert? I think that's been an interesting journey for us in terms of influencers versus decision makers to a deal.
And you find that slightly, is it changed in this current economic climate where you need to bring in, kind of classic like multi-threading with different people in the buying unit, but especially the FD? So it certainly needs to be justified in more ways than, people giving particular service or software a trial.
Yeah, it kind of depends on budget on my channel, everyone we deal with has got a constraint on budget to a certain extent. So you've got to kind of prioritize the segments you're going to reach, right? I think if they had unlimited funds, we would probably do CFOs everywhere, right? But just for that awareness before they hear about the opportunity. But yeah, if someone's only got like $1 to $3 grand a month, then there's got to be some trade-offs, So we probably focus more on the person that we need to take the first action, so that we've got a link to that company to kind of nurture. So who's most likely to respond to an email or book a demo? Probably we'd prioritize. Yeah.
I know we're kind of running out of time. I'd love to ask a very specific question to Kerry, actually, in terms of like those bespoke reports look like amazing, right? Because it's basically the ultimate focus. It's one shot. that are based on the expectation that they're presumably super hot and there's a best fit between what the company offers and what that account provides. But if it doesn't pay off, presumably then that kind of money's kind of wasted in a way. So I'd love to have your thoughts in terms of when that decision is made and what the thought processes are to say, right, it's got to be bespoke to be able to get it over the line, because it seems to me like the purest form of ABM, right?
Yeah, no, good question. I think, and that's why I wanted to show that picture of the dashboard at the end, because by tracking all of those engagements and really getting under the skin of our audience, we were able to then show which accounts were actually engaged already. And we were tagging the content by topic categories as well, so that we could then say, okay, say Barclaycard, really interested in fraud and payments. So then we could create something really bespoke based on what we know they're interested in, rather than creating something blind that we don't know whether it's going to get traction or not. And then it was a really wise investment of the money, and it always got good uptake.
Makes sense. It's fascinating.
If I may as well, I think there's a link with your last question, because if you know that in the current climate, it is more competitive to get someone, you need to convince more people, you need to convince the FD, then you can think about, here's a report that the person who actually uses my tool, that is going to add value to them, but also what do I need to give them they can take to their FD? And so you might be able to create something that, serves that particular need as well.
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, and it's really fascinating to see this level of detail in terms of interaction on a kind of sheet like this as well. Cool. I think we need to wrap it up. Thank you so much, guys. It's been a really interesting session of Great Shouts and how all these channels work together. It's been really useful. As I say, I'll send it out tomorrow with the deck, and we'll see you next fortnight for another session.
Cool.
Thanks a lot, everyone.
Thank you.
Just guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers, everyone.